Today I'm going to be speaking about issues of consequence in our world, how to find meaning, to be optimistic and hopeful in a challenging world. I teach about awakening, healing, and manifestation. I teach about consciousness and trauma. And if these modalities, if these teachings are really useful and productive, they will be demonstrated in our ability to solve the problems of our lives and of our times. And I'm going to move a little bit beyond teaching meditation or teaching spiritual practice to speak more broadly about what's happening in our world and how I think we can respond to it. So this is what makes a good YouTube channel. And I have a friend who's helping me, and he suggested this. He asked a question, and I'm going to read it in a minute. He asked a question that I think is really important. A topic that comes to mind, this is his writing, a topic that comes to mind is trying to locate hopefulness and optimism and taking steps to improve our lives in a time of great turmoil and perhaps even the decline of an empire. That's maybe a more generalized way of what you're already speaking to. It's a hard time to envision, let alone move skillfully towards a happy future, because everything seems to be falling apart around us. I struggle with that daily. I read an article the other day that quoted, I think, an Albanian dictator who said at the New Year in the 1950s, and I quote, "The bad thing about the coming year is that it will be harder than the year we just lived through. The good thing is that it will be easier than the following year, as in things are getting worse, and they will for a while." A lot of the theory I read at school foresaw the decline of the West and how that would likely involve democratic backsliding, the rise of neo-fascism, various social crises, and all sorts of troubling stuff. I find it very hard to be hopeful and avoid nihilism amidst all of this. Something to think about. So this is a real question, a real challenge of our times. I'm going to break it down into two parts and respond to them. So the first part is locating hopefulness and optimism, moving skillfully towards a happy future, and you didn't say it in there, but I would add having a motivation, having a positive view of the world and a motivation that allows us to participate positively in life. The other part of the question refers to the fact that the world seems to be falling apart around us. Social crises, political instability, the rise of all kinds of troubling social movements. This is something that's happening in our world. And I'm going to try not to speak too specifically about that, about what's happening in the world. We all have our own perspective on it. But I'm going to leave that part. I'm going to leave my comments about what's happening in the world to the end. Okay, so the first half of this video is me talking about motivation, hopefulness, optimism, moving skillfully towards a happy future. So first, as we begin this, I want you to think about your favorite movies. And if your favorite movie is a comedy, pick another one. Pick a movie that is heroic. My favorite movies are heroic. And all great heroic films or books or stories, they have a character or a group of characters who are moving through a tension and overwhelming experience. There's plot tension. There's a problem, and that problem is not very easily solved. In fact, it's the depth of motivation, the conviction, the faith of the character that succeeds in overwhelming odds. This is what makes a great heroic story. The character knows something or seems to feel something deeply that allows them to meet an overwhelming challenge and seemingly never break. They may buckle, they may question themselves, but in the end, they are not broken and they they win or triumph, and everyone rejoices. So that seems like the story that we're set up for. Maybe you don't have this challenge, but if you do, I would say that just puts you in the same category, in the same position as all heroes, whose job is to find the motivation, to find the will, to find the capacity to move through life in all of its challenges. So where do we find that? Well, when we do watch movies, or when we see great athletes or people who do wonderful feats in the world, we get a taste of that. When you watch Lord of the Rings and you see them go to Mordor, you go, that's inspiring. Nobody wants to go to Mordor. They go because they have to. It's like this with all epics. Characters compelled to do something. And when you go on that journey, you get a taste of that. But everyone's heroic qualities, everyone's heroic journey is unique. You're probably not going to go to Mordor and drop a ring into a lake of fire. You're not going to be an ultramarathoner unless that's what you are going to do. You're not going to be someone else, essentially. You're not going to be someone else, whether they are a real person or a fictitious character. Your heroicism, your heroic journey is unique to you. So when we try to locate hopefulness and optimism, my first point is that's going to have to be your hopefulness and optimism. That's going to have to be your skillful moving towards a happy future that's unique to you, a motivation that is unique to you. So where do you find your unique hopefulness, motivation, optimism, the capacity to move through life as it is? Those challenges, however you see them, whatever you experience, they're not going to go away. What's going to have to change is you're going to have to become more motivated. So one way traditionally in which people have garnered or developed this motivation is through suffering, through great struggle. And that is a mechanism. Some people, you will read wonderful stories, very inspiring stories about people who suffered tremendously and triumphed. I would put myself in that. I suffered tremendously. But the idea that an individual in and of themselves can suffer tremendously and have a breakthrough, that they can suffer so much until something pops in them. That's not a very repeatable, I wouldn't bank on that. I think for every person who has that transformational journey, there's probably 100 or 1,000 people who don't, who just suffer and struggle through their lives, who don't have a personal breakthrough, a personal switch. They don't just figure it out. So as a teacher, as one who's looking to create supports in the world, we're going to have to do something better than that. And I have a framework for that because it happened to me. I had a breakthrough. It came in many breakthroughs, but it came after struggling, after suffering, after failing very deeply at life. But I didn't just figure it out by myself. What happened was that I was introduced to a culture of people who were further along than I were, who had much more connection to themselves than I do, and who could shepherd me into being connected with myself. And what I discovered was the person that was struggling, the me that was struggling, the person that I was identified with that had so many problems in my life, this was only a narrow bandwidth of myself. I didn't know how to get out of that bandwidth. I didn't know how to get deeper into myself. And so where I looked for solutions for many years was within mostly my thinking, my habits, my the limited conditioned patterns that I had. I didn't know how to access more of myself. I didn't even know that there was more of myself to access. So then I met a group of people in the recovery community at first who said, actually, you can live more deeply in yourself. You can be honest. You can feel yourself more. You can sink below what you know of yourself and discover yourself. This blew my mind. I don't think I would have just figured it out by myself. There was mentorship, there was elders, people who could point me in the direction. And later on, I found people who pointed even deeper in different ways, and then blew my mind all over again. But for now, the point is simply to create this, to locate hopefulness and optimism. It's going to have to be unique to you. Okay? And if it's going to be unique to you, you're going to find it in yourself. And if you're going to find it in yourself, the best thing you can do to help yourself is find people who live deeply inside themselves and people who can see you and support you to feel and see yourself very deeply. People who can help you move below the superficial, narrow bandwidth of what you know about yourself to go deeper within your experience of yourself. I don't really define, what do I mean go deeper within yourself? Well, spiritual practice is really valuable for this. Spiritual practice is what I teach. And broadly speaking, spiritual practice says, underneath my thoughts, underneath my feelings, underneath my sensations, underneath what I can feel and know of myself, there's more. There's vastly more, not just like a little bit more. This is the whole point of the guided meditations that I teach, is really to help us access this in everything that I do. This inner life, the depth of our inner life, is not afraid of the world. The depth of our inner life is trying to make its way into the world. When we sink deeper into ourselves, what we discover is under the surface, there is so much capacity and potential that we need to bring here into our life, into our consciousness, into our world. This inherently creates a sense of meaning, of purpose, of direction. And as we're supported to live more deeply within ourselves, we become more energized. We have more life. We feel bigger in the face of the challenges of the world. And then what we see is actually that the challenges of the world are just like the challenges that we experienced. The challenges of the world are actually a reflection of the fact that we all collectively live in a very narrow bandwidth of ourselves. The world that we know, that we pay attention to, that we interact with, is shallow. And it's actually the shallowness that is the problem. It's not so much what's happening in the world. There's nothing wrong with you or our culture or the world as a whole. The problem is that we're only connected to a very small part of it. Now, why are we connected only to a very small part of ourselves? Maybe that's another video, another time that I will go into this. But what I'm inviting you to do is to take the risk, to take the time to look again at yourself. Take the time to feel yourself more. Take the time to explore the depth of what you are. Now, you probably, most likely, won't just go out and do this on your own. That probably doesn't even make any sense to you. So what I believe is that we need institutions in our world that support this. When I was growing up, there weren't really any institutions that I knew of that supported us. There was, in my high school, I could learn math and go to gym class. In my sports teams, I could play sports with my friends. I could have fun with my parents. I could get nagged about stuff. There was no place that said, "Who are you? Why are you here? What does it feel like to be you?" So I didn't learn that. There was no cultural support for that. So we have to create that. We have to create that. And I've already been creating this for 4 years. I just haven't been making any YouTube videos about it. I support a whole group of people that are a culture, a deepening culture. And in this deepening culture, there is a mutual, a balanced relationship between being seen and seeing other people, which means that the inspiration, the optimism, the hopefulness, the motivation comes both from within ourselves, but also in seeing other people deeply, in feeling the power and depth of what other people are and what they are bringing into life, what they are discovering about themselves, and what they are able to do in the world. And the more that they show up, the more this resonates with the depth of me. And the growing capacity of this community just continues to mirror itself and sink deeper and deeper and deeper. More energy, more aliveness, more capacity, more care, more wisdom, more intelligence, more of everything that you need really to be successful in this life. So we'll go over the main points again. How are we going to locate this hopefulness and optimism and the skill to move towards a happy future, given the world being the way it is? We're going to do this. This is my summary. We're going to do this by knowing ourselves. We don't know ourselves in isolation. We know ourselves by being with people who are learning to know themselves. This is the way we learn anything. We learn something by devoting our time to it and sharing the work, sharing the process together. And that's what this channel is all about. That's what my work in the world is all about. And if you want to begin that process, you can watch some of the other guided meditations that I've created. I'm going to have to find more and more skillful ways to demonstrate this process beyond the guided meditations. I'm working on that. In the meantime, the guided meditations and other videos that I produce in the future, that's what I have so far. Okay, the other part of this question is, everything seems to be falling apart around us. This one. It's hard to avoid nihilism, decline of the West, democratic backsliding, neo-fascism, social crisis, all sorts of troubling stuff. Okay, the world is falling apart. I'm not going to get into the specific things that are happening in the world. Again, I think we all have a really different perspective on that. And I'm going to learn how to speak. I'm going to learn how to speak about these things. But for now, what I want to say is, yes, there's lots to be concerned about. But I want to give a different perspective on it. So I want you to Wikipedia 19th century, wars in the 19th century in Europe. If my video editing skills get good, perhaps I will pull that list up on the screen here in this video, if I can figure out how to do that. Okay, wars in the 19th century. If you look that up, or if it is here on the screen, what you will see is a seemingly endless number of armed conflicts in Europe in the 19th century. And I look this up sometimes to give perspective to the time that we are in. I don't think the world is getting more violent. I think the world is getting less violent. I think that for centuries, for thousands of years, our ancestors have worked to improve the world. And I think it's working in many regards. I think the world is getting better. I think the world is getting less violent. I think the world is getting safer. I think the quality of life for human beings is improving. But here's the thing. When you improve the quality of life for human beings, they become more sensitive. When you improve the quality of life for human beings, they become more sensitive, and we have a lower tolerance for war and racism and conflict in the world and violence towards groups of people and damage to the environment and all the other things that you may see. The things that trouble you are, from my perspective, the fact that they trouble you is a luxury. It's because you are well enough to care. You are well enough to not tolerate things that don't feel good. That's actually a sign of our collective well-being. So is the world falling apart? Well, we can talk more about this in the future. But your care about this, for me, is a sign of health. That's not going to go away. We're not suddenly going to start to lower our standards. Our standards are going to go up. We're going to respond to all those things that are happening in the world, all the things that don't feel just or loving or a reflection of our highest potential. To do that, we need to have a sense of self, a felt sense of motivation that is bigger and stronger than the problems. And because these are, in many ways, collective problems, these are human problems, this sense of self and this capacity is going to have to be both personal and it's going to be collective. Unlike Lord of the Rings, or well, I guess it doesn't even happen in Lord of the Rings, but unlike a heroic epic story, there will not just be one hero. You cannot have one person save the world. What you can have is people unified, connected in their motivation, creating a coherent field of care and aliveness that together intelligently responds to what's happening all over the world. In my life, in your life, in nations and states and globally, a coherent field of people unified in their care, in connection to themselves and connection to each other. A global body, a living field of love and light and motivation. That's what we need to build. And that's why this channel exists. So that's it for this video. The next time I make a video, it will be because I sat in my motivation and I sat in the questions about what's happening in our world. The things that I see when I look out my window, but also when I look on the internet, and I come up with a response from the depth of myself, a new way to relate to the life that I am born to give to participate, that I'm committed to seeing through. Hope this helps.